So today I wanted to talk a little bit about contraction and expansion. So contraction and expansion are natural phases that we go through in life as humans. So contraction is when we go into these states of sadness, anger, fear, any kind of resistance or fear state. And when we go into contraction, things kind of seize up. We literally turn down within ourselves and maybe even shut down. Now, expansion, on the other hand, might be periods of peace, happiness, joy, fulfillment. So those are expansive states where we're more open, right? Where we're more available for connection with other people, and we're sort of in the flow. So again, as humans, we naturally go in and out of both of these states. Life is not static. Energy is not static. We're always changing and evolving and moving. And so there's this concept that Dr. Peter Levine, who is the creator of Somatic Experiencing, which is a powerful somatic healing tool for nervous system regulation and healing trauma that I'm currently in my intermediate year of training with. Dr. Levine coined the term pendulation. And so pendulation points to this contraction and expansion. So, and this is something that he says even amoebas do this contraction and expansion, and humans are always doing it. Now, the reason I'm talking about this today is because on the healing path, and especially if we're on a spiritual healing path and we're looking to evolve and grow and transform and expand, there can be, for a lot of us, a lot of attachment to wanting that expansion. So we're seeking the expansion, which of course makes sense. Nobody starts out on the healing path or the spiritual journey wanting to contract, right? And so we go through these phases of expanding and expanding. But what happens is when we expand, we naturally, the next phase is to contract. And then the natural phase after contracting is expansion. And so the idea is with pendulation that if we learn to tolerate and even befriend the sometimes challenging emotional states and constricting sort of physical sensations that come with contraction, we lean into those and learn to tolerate those a little bit more over time, then each time we lean in to those states of contraction and sort of navigate our way through them with as much openness as possible, the more expansion we have available to us the next time. So we might contract and then expand, contract and then expand a little more, contract and expand a little more until eventually we've expanded even more. Because as we sort of lean into these sensations of contraction, we gain more capacity to navigate the next one that comes and then to move into that state of expansion that follows, right? And so I'm definitely not suggesting that you lean hard into that state of contraction, diving full on into fear or anger or sadness, like diving straight in is not the way to go. It's, we want to stay on the outer edges of whatever the sense of activation is. So if it's an emotional state of fear or anger, we just kind of stay on the outside of it. If we're experiencing that physical contraction in our body, we just stay on the outer edges of it, right? So we don't want to dive into the exploding volcano in a sense, right? So we want to do this just as much as our system can handle it. And then again, we expand our capacity over time. And one of the things that I want to talk about that I think is so prevalent in our culture right now is that there are a lot of people, again, on the healing path, on the path of transformation and spiritual growth, spiritual awakening, that are actively seeking expansion. And some of the ways that people are doing that is through some different types of breath work, some psychedelic plant medicine, and, sometimes the non-dual spiritual practices as well are in this category where we can go into these places of expansion through these catalytic experiences like breath work and plant medicine journeys that we really can't control where we go, obviously. The medicine or our breath will take us where it takes us, right? And sometimes we end up in a really highly activated state in our nervous system. So basically, sometimes we hit upon these places in ourselves that are too much for us, that overwhelm our nervous system. And if our nervous system is overwhelmed, then we it sort of gets in our way a little bit. Then we have to kind of maybe do some cleanup around that overwhelm now. And again, ideally, it's that we titrate, which means little bits at a time, little bits at a time. We go into these expanded states, little bit more next time, little bit more next time, right? With things that we can titrate, again, that we can kind of, all right, just a little bit more, right? But with something like breath work or plant medicine, we can't titrate, right? Not very well at all, because the medicine or our breath is going to take us wherever it takes us. And sometimes that's out of our body. Sometimes we go into a state of dissociation. Sometimes we're triggered into a past life experience or into a past current life experience that was really traumatic. And we can't control whether or not we go there. And so we might land in some really horrible experience and not be able to navigate our way through it very well or at all. And now what we're left with is a hyperactivated system normally. Sometimes we go into hypoactivation, which is more depressed, sort of collapsed state. But typically with these kinds of things I'm mentioning, it's more of a hyperactivation, high anxiety, panic, fear, really activated state. And now, again, we have to do cleanup to sort of recover from that. And that can take our system a while. And so what that means is that big expansion that wasn't titrated can send us into a deeper level of contraction that we might then stay in for a lot longer. And then, of course, if we keep doing that, we kind of keep pulling ourselves back from the sort of growth and forward movement that we're seeking. So the trick is, again, to titrate and try to stay with things that are ideally not going to catapult us out of our bodies, out of our experience. The idea with healing and nervous system regulation is to come into our bodies. And this is one of the reasons why the primary way that I teach and do my client sessions and programs at this point is grounded practices, nervous regulation, grounded spiritual practices, connecting to the earth, connecting to nature, connecting to our bodies, and achieving growth from that grounded place versus growing up and out and then not being able to hold or contain that growth. So this back and forth, one of the other things I want to mention is that what I frequently see in my practice is people who have been doing plant medicine, sometimes just once, sometimes multiple times, and they come in and they feel like they've done something wrong because they're not remaining in that high state. So yes, absolutely, breath work, plant medicine, some other things can certainly put us in this much higher vibrational state, this state of ecstasy, of bliss, of joy, of interconnection with the universe and all things and our higher self. And that's wonderful. But can we hold it? Can we contain it? Typically not, because that state is much bigger than we have the capacity to hold from our state of perhaps ungroundedness. So I always want to teach people to not judge yourself if you are not remaining in that state. And even with any other thing, if you go to see a healer or you do some classes and you're working on your healing path and you can't stay there, right? You can't stay in that happier, higher state all the time. So many of us beat up on ourselves about that. But again, what I'm telling you remains true. Expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. This is how we grow, right? Is expanding and contracting a little bit more every time until we can eventually hold. But we have to be mindful of how much our system can hold. So self-love all the way, wherever you are, if you are not remaining in that higher state, is completely normal, because I've had 40 plus ayahuasca journeys, just as an example. And I too was so frustrated that I couldn't remain there, or in some of my other spiritual practices as well. And that's because we have to build incrementally, gradually over time. So it's not your fault that you're not staying in those super, super high vibration states. It's not your fault at all. You've done nothing wrong. The medicine is not going to take you to a higher space and then leave you there permanently. What's going to happen is you're going to come back down into your body, into what we call ordinary reality. And it can be a challenging contrast, to be sure. But that is the process. You're coming back into contraction again, right? But remember, that state of contraction will allow you to expand a little bit more next time. You're not doing anything wrong. My suggestion is to titrate little experiences instead of these big catalytic, cathartic experiences that are unmanageable. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please do put them down below. And if you like this content, would like to follow along or share with anyone else, please subscribe, and I will see you soon.